Hey there, and welcome to Create a Place podcast. I'm Kristina York, co-founder and principal at Create & Co. Architecture and Interior Design Studio. I'll also be your guide to workplace design, culture, and well-being. We've got a lot of great guests coming up, so grab your coffee, tea, or cocktail and pull up a seat for some great conversations and some valuable takeaways.
Welcome to Create a Place podcast. This is actually our first filming. I don't know if this will actually be the first one to release, but I'm really excited because I have Kay Sargent here, who is Director of Thought Leadership, HOK.
Yeah.
Also an interior designer.
Yes.
And speaker, and been doing this 30 years.
Do whatever, provocateur, pain in the ass, gadfly, whatever you want to call it.
I love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Equal opportunity offender.
Yes, absolutely.
I love that one. So I'm excited to have you here. We met several years ago.
Yeah.
I've been following you for a while, and then we met in person, and this was a great story, right? 2019, we did a wellness leadership at the Garrison Institute.
Oh my gosh, I remember that place.
Upstate New York.
I remember that conference.
It was a Capuchin monastery formerly.
Yes,
So
it was such a beautiful setting.
Yes.
On the Hudson Valley, right, like north of New York City.
It was right on the river. It was gorgeous.
Beautiful, right across from West Point.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a monastery. So no air conditioning, like no shoes. I think it's the only conference I've ever been to where like shoeless. In fact, if we wanted to do it in the spirit, we could.
Let's be in the spirit then.
I'll go shoeless just for that moment. And the bedrooms, they were like wooden beds, like the bare minimum that you could be, and gang showers and bathrooms. I remember that.
Yeah,
and
awesome.
I spent many years in summer camp. I can go there, but maybe with like 5 or 6 of my best personal friends, right? Like that really well. This is like a professional group of individuals,
Yes.
so it was a little interesting to be there. Very rustic, but very interesting. I don't know. What did you think? Did you like it?
I loved it, but I am a little more hippy dippy, I think. I mean, I'm more comfortable in my bare feet.
Yeah, it was a little hippy dippy. It really absolutely was.
Some great yoga meditation sessions we had.
Yeah, and I think after the first night, I'm like, you know what? I really need to go. There's so many other things that I need to do. And then because we're in the middle of nowhere, you couldn't get an Uber. It's impossible. And you couldn't really get back, and I'm like, oh my God, we're
I think there was a single taxi, and he had been driving a taxi there for 40 years.
Yeah, and there was a train.
Yes.
And you could walk to the train station through the woods. So here you are, like lugging your suitcase through the woods on all this craziness, but it wasn't clearly marked.
No.
And so my friend said, oh, we go over the bridge. So we ended up in the middle of nowhere, lost in the woods, watching the train we were supposed to be on speed by. And I'm just like, I'm never getting out of here.
It's like a scene of a horror movie.
It
a little bit.
kind of almost was.
Yeah.
For something that was supposed to be so idyllic. But it was great conversations, good
Yes.
things that were happening. Yeah.
It was good, and I think it was ironic that it was almost exactly a year before everything shut down for COVID. And we had some great wellness conversations. We had already started all of these conversations. And I know that you and I both, in our own industry have been talking about, how we really enhance the workplace experience and well-being and all for years before this all came down on us. So I'm curious what you feel like has happened since then. What are kind of some of those?
Since we all got slapped across the face by COVID?
Slapped. What, in general, what do you feel like, we're heading towards right now?
I think, first of all, it was a total left turn for our industry. And I will say that before COVID even happened, we were kind of talking about the fact that this might be our industry's Kodak moment.
Yes.
Not COVID, but just where we are as an industry as a whole. I feel like the real estate industry as a whole is broken. That if you ask people, can people get in and out of space fast enough? Are they well suited? Are we creating the right kind of places that people want to be? Are they flexible enough? Do they really meet people's needs? I think the answer to a lot of those questions is no. And yet we keep doing it the same way.
Yes.
And I think COVID basically was a sharp left turn. And I kind of use the analogy that the real estate industry was like this big tractor trailer going down the road, and all of a sudden we have to make this quick left turn, and we were too big to make the turn.
Right.
And so we kind of got stuck. And for a lot of our clients right now, they can't get unstuck, and they don't know how to go forward because that path is maybe unknown. And so some of them right now, after God, we're almost 5 years into this, right?
Yeah.
Some of them right now are saying, okay, well, let's just back up. But you're backing up to something that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
It is fundamentally shifted and fundamentally
It's
changed.
gone. I mean,
so I think that we're really kind of an interesting moment where we have to do something differently, and I'm not really sure our industry is ready to do it.
so, my goal in doing this podcast and meeting with experts like you is, to figure out how we get them unstuck. And I want to be in this position to, be a guide or, an advocate, continue to do that and connect these, the leadership and the employees, and let's figure out how we get to that. So how do we start that process? How do we get them unstuck?
Yeah, well,
move forward?
I'll tell you how we don't do it. And this drove me just nuts in the beginning of the pandemic. Look, I've been a practicing designer for 40 years. I have waited for years for people to take what we do seriously.
Yes.
And then COVID hits, and all of a sudden, we are, front page of the news every single day, workplace, etc. But now everybody's an expert in what we do. And everybody has an opinion. And the craziest stories are making the news, like the most obscure things, right? I can talk to a reporter for an hour, and they'll take one crazy little soundbite, and that's what they talk about, right? Mm-hmm. And I think what we shouldn't do in the beginning, there were a lot of people, that asked stupid questions, and there is such a thing as a stupid question.
I agree.
And we asked them. And then B, I think that there were a lot of people that said, well, we really don't know. And there's validity in being humble and saying we don't know everything. But we know a lot.
Yes.
And there are a lot of companies that have been working remotely or in a hybrid manner for a long time. And we can learn lessons from that. But if we don't learn lessons from that and we just act like, well, who knows, we're just all guessing, then why would anybody listen to us, right? And so I think what we did is we really doubled down into two things. One, the science of design, not just the art of it.
Yes.
But helping our clients make decisions based on fact or reality or what they're doing, so that they can lead to better decisions and then feel good about it and move forward. Not just, well, we kind of think this, or hey, maybe this, or why don't you try that, or this is trending. Like, none of that's based in reality or fact.
Right.
We notoriously are bad at looking at the horizon or the future. We tend to deal with what's happening now, which is really interesting for an industry that is building buildings that will stand for 70 years or designing spaces that will stand for 10 years. You would think that we would absolutely be the most forward thinking, right? But people tend to kind of ignore the gray rhinos. You have black swans, COVID, that just come out of nowhere and you can't predict. But there are things, gray rhinos, that exist. They're on the horizon, and they're clearly in your sight, but you're just kind of ignoring them because you don't know what to do.
Right.
The commute, flexibility of hours, all of those things are gray rhinos. Artificial intelligence, technology, I mean, we can go through a handful. And what happened during, I think, COVID in the last 5 years is people have been so focused on addressing what's, the dumpster fire that this has been, that they haven't really been looking at the horizon. And so now all of a sudden, all of those gray rhinos are much closer. And we really need to be thinking about how do we address those and how do we address the things that are on the horizon. So we're doing a lot of future casting with our clients right now. We're doing a lot of analysis. And it's about getting out of your silos and looking across to see whether it's social economic, whether it's the labor force. You have to look across a variety of things to see what that will really have an impact on our industry.
Yeah. Do you think it's a lot of fear? I mean, I feel like there's a lot of fear around trying and, beta testing and some of these solutions, right? Is that part of what's keeping people from doing the right thing?
Yes, well,
and they're not recognizing that they already have a lot of this information that they can start building on.
We haven't notoriously been given permission to fail, especially in North America.
Yes.
And I think this has actually held us back in a way. In other parts of the world, you have shorter leases, and you're designing from the finished floor to the underside of the finished ceiling. So you're not building out as extensively, and it maybe is a little bit cheaper, right? And you do something for 3 years. If it doesn't work, oh well, whatever. In North America, we have the longest lease times, and we tend to build things out from, in shell space very elaborately. And so the the unwritten rule has always been, we're going to spend a lot of money on this, don't screw it up. And so because of that, I think people have erred on the side of being more conservative. And then once you've made a decision, you're kind of stuck with it for 10 years. And that's a broken model because nothing stays the same for 10 years.
No.
Nothing. The labor force doesn't stay the same. Technology doesn't stay the same. And so if workplace doesn't change, it is becoming the anchor, especially if you went conservative to begin with. And I think right now, our clients have so much pressure on them from the C-suite because everybody now is paying attention to real estate.
It's microscopic attention,
right?
And it's daunting.
I can't tell you how many times we've been in the middle of an engagement, and then the client will say, "Well, the CEO just read this article in some magazine that said this, and now all of a sudden he's questioning everything." Right?
We get that same thing.
Going back to these crazy articles.
What if we do it this way?
I know.
But hang on, this isn't even your industry. This isn't even what you do for work.
Right. Which is why if we can say, all right, let's base it on fact. Let's base it on science and lean into the science of design. And so that you can clearly justify and articulate it, then you'll feel better about the decisions you're making. You can justify it, and then you can move forward. Because otherwise, you're just in this loop of, well, I don't know, what do we think, and opinion, and those kinds of things that are coming in. And that's not a way to manage anything.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I know we see the same thing, in our clients. It's hard to get them to bite off smaller chunks. They do have the longer leases. They have the bigger build outs. But obviously that's changing because they can't afford these longer leases. They can't afford this build out anymore. So they have to be more nimble and they have to, do that. So what have you seen? Do you have any, good examples of clients that have been able to do that successfully? And by successfully, I mean, have they been able to fail successfully and move on? Is there something that we can learn from that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, that most of our big clients have millions of square feet of space. Not all, some have smaller portfolios, but they have a lot of space and they have a lot of existing space, and they don't necessarily have the luxury of just saying, okay, let's start from scratch, and how do we do this?
Yeah.
And so for a lot of our clients, I would say about a year or two in, once they started really, bringing people back in, you have those low peak days, those high peak days, and they're like, how do we manage this, right? And in our profession, we design all kinds of crazy places, and we'll say not every day is Easter Sunday, but you always got to design the parking lot as if it was. Right?
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to think about that in the workplace as well. But what we talk to a lot of our clients about doing is, all right, pick a floor, preferably the first floor or a very public floor, and create an incubator space. A space where you can pilot different things, really activate it, you can experiment with some things, and on low peak days, shut down the other parts of the building and drive people into that space. So not only it's safer because you don't have a person on a floor that nobody knows what happens to them, or you save on cleaning, you save on operational costs if you can do so, but it creates an energy or a buzz. Because nobody wants to go into a space that is so underoccupied that it feels like Saturday syndrome, right?
And I'm not going to drive an hour to get there and there's 5 people randomly scattered throughout the building.
And that just feels creepy, right? It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel good.
Right.
So if you can create these, then you also then get that cross-pollination of people within your organization. You can kind of break down some of those silos of, I usually go in, park, go up to the 5th floor, sit at my desk, go back, never see anybody else. So now all of a sudden you're kind of infusing a different sense of community. And on high peak days, those tend to be, when you open up the other floors, that can be the overflow space. That can be the space where visitors are coming. That can be the space where teams can go and can, gather together. And what we actually found with the clients that we were doing this with is that space actually became really the prime space all 5 days. People wanted it, and then they started asking for it. So it was a way to help manage the problem at hand, but also introduce them to potential solutions for the future without them even really knowing.
So they organically did this for themselves, really.
Right.
It
tended to be a little bit of a pilot. And I think the other thing is, a lot of people were talking about pilots. You have to be strategic about it.
Yeah.
Because if you test everything, you test nothing. You have to really understand who you're designing for and be targeted and really design it and take a few chances and do some, maybe a few wild things, but be prepared to really kind of experiment a little bit in there.
But it's also a science too. So you also are designing what you think is going to be the solution for that specific team and that specific industry, and knowing the history of what that company has done before. Right?
And I would say it's less about what we think now. It's more about what we know. Mm-hmm. So we actually have reinvented our entire toolkit about how we approach our clients.
Okay.
Because we used to go in and start with a visioning session. Mm-hmm. What do you want? Right? And I have to believe that a lot of our clients are like, I don't know, that's why I hired you
Exactly.
to tell me, right?
That's why we're paying you to do this.
Right. It's like if you go to a doctor and he says, well, what do you think you have? Right? It's like, I came to you, right? So I think we really basically have created, we do look and feel, but we don't really do visions anymore. We do kind of framing the possible, mm-hmm. because so much has changed that our clients don't even know where they are. And we're asking them to tell us where they want to be. And it's like, help me figure out where I even am. Like, and what's even possible? I don't even know. You're asking me, it's like asking somebody what they want at a restaurant they've never eaten at before.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a great point.
Right.
So are you coming in after already talking to them and researching them and kind of coming up with, some potential solutions or some framework? Or are you just coming in and saying, here's what we're seeing, here's what we know to be true about the office?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
So we're coming in and we're saying, here are the factors at play. Where do you stand on these? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? Is this important to you? Is this not? Whether it's neurodiversity, whether it's sustainability, whether it's resiliency, all of these things. And for a lot of our clients that think they're really cutting edge, even for those clients, they're like, wow, we didn't really think about some of this stuff before. Like, we should think about this. Because it all has an impact. Right. Social economic, all of this stuff. And so we're kind of challenging them on that. And then we take them through a very structured process of identifying who are you actually designing for? Right, so I'll just give you an example of the wrong way to approach this. In the beginning, there was this whole notion of, well, the only reason people are coming in is to gather. So let's just put a bunch of gathering spaces, okay? Well, there's a lot of people that don't collaborate.
No.
They do a lot of heads down solo work. And
they may come in because they can't focus at home. So they need to come in and have a place they can do that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding the personas, understanding the work styles, the patterns, the organizational DNA. Once you really understand that, the right solutions start to become self-evident. And so it's taking them through an exercise, not only for them to understand who they are, but for us to understand it, because 1 + 1 = 2.
Every time.
And if I know what 1 and 1 is, I'll get you to 2.
Yeah.
But if I don't even ask that, I'm never going to get you to that, right? So I think it's really about a much deeper engagement and it doesn't have to take a lot more time. It's just about asking better questions and really having an understanding and then basing the solutions on what people are actually doing.
Love it. That's very succinct, and that's exactly the goal. And that's kind of similar to what you're doing. So we're at Cornet, and
yes,
2024.
Cornet.
So we're going to hear a lot of sessions, today, tomorrow, and Sunday, and this will be great. And you have one on Sunday,
what do you
a
think
panel.
We're going to hear, by the way?
What are we going to hear?
We're going to hear a lot about artificial intelligence.
We're going to hear that.
Because for a long time it was return to office. Mm-hmm. And then I think last year there was a lot of, to my chagrin, there was a lot of how do you make the workplace amazing, right? I think our industry is being set up for failure because I can design an amazing place.
I felt that way last year too.
Right?
It was, yes.
If you aren't operating it, it's really an operational model more than anything else. If you don't set up the policies, et cetera. So workplace alone isn't going to do it for you.
Right.
We're ignoring. That's one of the gray rhinos that we're ignoring. But artificial intelligence seems to be taking over all the conferences. So I think we're going to hear a lot about that.
I mean, I think we're going to continue to hear, the psychology, more about the psychology of the spaces. Are we still talking about mandate versus magnet? Is that really still a huge conversation, or have we not learned?
It is. Well, here's what I'm going to say on that one. I think, first of all, this is not a binary choice. It's not all or nothing.
Right.
Second of all, there is a lot more to this than most people acknowledge. And there are a lot of decisions that are being made, and the reason behind some of these decisions are not as public as maybe they should be. I think we're going to look back on this period and say this was an absolute failure of leadership and communication.
Communication.
And, what people hate, people don't mind change. What they hate is a transition. And we're in this extruded transition. And if I don't know the end game, then I'm unnerved. You may not like what Jamie Dimon or Elon Musk did, but they were clear, they were concise, and everybody knew where they stand.
Exactly.
Companies that are waffling or telling people they can work remotely while they're building massive buildings, it doesn't equate, right?
A mixed signal.
And like, you kind of know what's coming, but then everybody acts surprised when it does. And there's a lot of other things. There are a lot of economic incentives and other things that are driving these decisions. And a whole lot of people are just jumping all over this and making wild speculations and just saying, it's because we're all trying to control you. There's a lot more to it for a lot of these companies than that.
I agree.
There
I
really
think if
is.
leadership would just come to the realization that sharing some, just being transparent a little bit, this is why, even if it's because we need to drive innovation, just give me a reason why you want me to come back, or, give me some flexibility around it, right?
Yeah,
I think
they're
that's
not
the important
communicating,
thing. Right.
And they're not really leading. And I think you're advocating that, and I think that's causing a lot of issues.
I agree. So your panel on Sunday is going to be about the silos.
Yeah.
And so tell us just real quick, I don't want to give away anything, and of course we won't see this till after the conference, but what's, kind of a synopsis of that, and is there a certain part of that, equation, on the panel that you are going to focus on yourself?
Right, so just point of reference, here we are at Cornett in Washington, D.C., 4 days before the election. And
Quiet before the storm around here.
I don't think I've ever seen our country as siloed and divided as we are right now. So when we talk about silos, it is the haves and the have-nots. It's the can work from home and the can't work from home. It's the organizational silos. It's the societal silos. It's the geopolitical silos. And I think one of the things that in any book about business, siloed organizations, or anytime you're working in a vacuum or you get that group think, you're probably not making the best decisions. And so diversity and equity is important.
Because you're not being fully informed.
Right.
You're not getting all of the points.
Right, and you're seeing one point of view, right? And I think we are entrenched in many, many silos right now. And I think it was fascinating, in the beginning of the pandemic, some people were saying, oh, I feel more connected to my colleagues now that I'm working from home and we're on Zoom calls all the time. Other people were like, yeah, I feel less connected. And so two things can be true at the same time. Microsoft did a study of like 65,000 employees, and what they found is that people felt more connected to their immediate circle, people they had to work with, but their secondary and tertiary connections felt almost nothing.
Oh, sure.
And the people that were newer to an organization, who didn't know people as well, when you spend time to somebody, you understand their body language, you understand what they're meaning, you understand their personality.
Sure.
So if somebody's quiet on a call, you understand why. Versus if you've never met that person, you might think, does that person not agree? You start getting in your head and you start changing what you're saying, and it changes your ability to share or innovate, et cetera, right? And so I think anything that we can do to break down some of these silos is important. And what we're starting to see is that the people that can work from home tend to be higher educated, higher income. And you look at an organization that has a very diverse workforce, some that are working in factories or fulfillment centers, and other ones that are working remotely, and these guys are required to come to the office 5 days a week, but these guys, we don't want to ever come back to the office. You start to get silos and resentments and all kinds of things in organizations that are not healthy. And that are not good. And so I think what we're really talking about on Sunday in our panel is, how do we break down some of those silos societally organizationally, industry-wide, across everything.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a good talk. So have to tune in for that. Cool.
Well, if we crack that nut, we'll let you know. But we've got a great panel of
follow
people,
up to that.
from different companies that are going to be on there. So we're excited about that.
I think I'll be there. I think that's on my schedule. So
It better be.
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely, I'll be there.
I need the heckling section.
Oh, I'll do that.
Yeah,
yes,
good.
I'll be all ready to go. But you've been doing this a long time, like we talked about, and I know you started out as a designer, and now you have grown into much more than that. Thought leadership. I mean, this panel you're doing on Sunday is one of 100 events, 100 talks that you're going to do this year.
That's pretty close. That's not exact. I would laugh and say, "Oh, that's not exact." It's actually not.
That's insane. So how do you keep passionate and and I'm kind of in the same boat with you. I've been designing for 25 years, and now I'm sort of transitioning into more of the thought leadership and the research and, embracing the other side of what we do. And I really am loving that so far, but I'm kind of, just kind of eking in there. And so what do you love about this piece of design that you do? And is there anything you miss? Do you not do certain things that you used to do all the time?
Well, one of my favorite questions ever is what are your hobbies, right? And it's like, okay, I have 5 children. I travel internationally. I work for a big company, and I'm all over the place. And you want me to have a hobby too? Like, you've got to be kidding me, right? But I think.
What is your hobby?
I don't really. I honestly am one of those people. I mean, my kids literally joke. It's like, do you ever stop working? Like, do you ever put that down? Even last night when we were watching something, and the whole time I was working, on something simultaneously. But
that's your hobby then.
Yeah, and look, I mean, 5 kids, death is my retirement plan, and I only wish I was joking about that. Like, the numbers are not in my favor. But I will tell you what keeps me passionate is curiosity. I think I am by nature a very curious person, and so when somebody asks us something, we like to be able to answer our clients' questions, and it's kind of amazing to me just what a question can do. And I will say that 8 years ago, a client asked us a question at the end of the meeting, just kind of casually as we were all leaving the room. He said, "How do you design space for someone that's neurodiverse?" And having designed a ton of space, I think I've designed every kind of space on the planet, quite frankly. And having 5 kids, I had an okay answer to that, but not as good as I wanted it to be. And so we started to do a deep dive, and we found a hole. And I mean, during my 40 years, if you go back, there was a time where I was designing very, very high secure facilities for very high secure government agencies all around the world. I've designed campuses. I've designed, I think in every single sector. I've designed courthouses, healthcare, you name it. And I was around when ADA came involved, got very active in the WELL standard. Right now we're really focused on a lot of different things, the trends, et cetera, but also neurodiversity and how do we design for sensory processing. So I just feel like there's not enough time in the day to do everything that I want. And I have never felt like I was bored, and never felt like there was enough time for me to do everything that I wanted to do. So I think it's that curiosity and that, and here's the other thing. I actually really firmly believe that the spaces that we are designing can have a positive impact on society.
Yeah.
But I also have to acknowledge that if we aren't designing them well, they can have a negative impact.
Yeah, negative.
And that's not an option.
Yeah.
And I think no designer went into this profession feeling like, we want to stick it to people, right? Like, we want to empower people and create great spaces.
Right.
And so being in a profession where there's just so many different ways that you can do that and so many different angles that you can take, I feel very privileged. And I'm really energized by that. And the other thing that energizes me is the younger generation, right? Like, there are times that I just think, okay, the best thing we can do is just get out of their way, because some of the young designers and their passions and their talents and their abilities and some of the things that they can do are just like unbelievable.
It's amazing.
And so I'm very fortunate that I get to work with some incredibly talented designers all around the world that truly inspire me every day.
It's awesome. I mean, imagine if we had had that much instant access to so much information when we were in our 20s. And maybe it's overload, maybe it's good or bad.
It's a double-edged sword. I think we went way overboard, and I think we probably have too much.
I have to agree with that too. I think there's a balance in there. So in all the years that you've been designing, is there one thing that maybe was a trend or a thought or, something that you tried, that you changed your mind about or that you were wrong about?
You're asking me if I've ever been wrong, and the answer is
I know.
yes.
Clear the room. Here we go.
Yes. Well, I think there's something that actually surprised me even in the last 5 years. And I was always the first person in the office and the last person to leave. And then I started traveling, and I travel a lot, so I'm rarely in one office or one location. But in the beginning of the pandemic, there was this whole notion of people are coming into the office for an hour or two and then going home. And I'm like, well, why would you ever commute all the way in just to turn around and leave? Like, if you're going to make the effort to be there, then make the most out of it. But I think my own work patterns, I think everybody during COVID experienced something that was really important. And that was, I don't know a single company that told people, go home because of the pandemic. And by the way, while you're at it, just make up your own hours. But that, in a sense, is what a lot of people did. And there are a lot of people that are morning people or evening people. And when you have to work a 9 to 5, rarely have I ever met somebody, I did the other day at a conference, that says, I kick ass at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, oh my God, that's my sweet spot.
Is
right?
there anyone?
Right? Yeah, there is. I actually met one the other day. But most people, when you're most productive, you're either burnt out from your day or you're getting ready to commute and you're not, right? So you wake up in the morning, you've got all these great ideas, but I'll do that when I get to the office. And then at the end of the day, you realize you got derailed by everything else and you never got to that, right? And so we're not, in many cases, working in our natural rhythm and cycles. And I realized that I work much better in spurts. And I, will wake up in the morning, crunch, 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 crunch. Then I can go do a bunch of things, but spurts throughout the day. I don't think anybody can work solid for 8 hours.
I'm the same way.
But the way that we work right now isn't necessarily really set up to support that. And I think that's one of the gray rhinos that we really need to think about and address. So I often will find myself at the office at 3 o'clock in the afternoon thinking, all right, I've got 5 more hours of calls. Because, East Coast, West Coast, London, wherever, Asia. And I can sit here until I'm so burnt out and so exhausted that I can't get home. Or I can leave now, miss traffic, take those calls from home, and then when they're done, be home.
Yes.
And so I am one of those people that am adjusting my schedule, even though I work all day, but where I am, to really kind of maximize what is also then going to give me some sense of balance in my life. What little sense of balance I actually have, and my children would say I have no sense of balance, but what little sense of balance I have, it helps.
Do you think there really is a balance, or is it really just become more of an integration?
No, it's an integration.
Yeah.
I will clearly say that there are times that I put my family first, and there are clearly times where I put my job first.
Yeah.
And it's never a perfect balance, never. And I think you have to forgive yourself and let yourself, acknowledge that. And I think you need to go with that and realize it's never going to be 100% balanced. But I will also say that the younger generation is facing a very different reality. I came in to work with no debt, thinking I would work for 30 years in one profession. I thought that I would stay in one, career and maybe change jobs a few times. I couldn't really work in the evenings because we didn't have computers or cell phones or even the internet when I first started working.
Impossible to be remote.
Right, I know. And my kids will jokingly say, you had to ride your horse to work. It's like, no, not that bad. But
I had a sulky.
Right. We had the promise of being better off than our parents, and there was employer-employee loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
The reality that our children are graduating into is very different.
Yeah.
They have a lot of debt. They are going to be working a lot longer. They're going to finish their careers in professions that don't even exist today.
Which is wild.
Right.
Yeah.
And that means that they're going to constantly have to get upskilled and retrained. And they've just been told that they're not going to be as well off as their parents. And so I think the younger generation right now, call them whatever you want. I think they instinctively realize that they have to find some balance. Either I got to make a lot of money quick so that I'm set, or I'm going to push back and find balance now. And if I want to take a year off, I'm going to do it now, because I'm not going to wait until I retire, because retirement could be 60 years away.
Yeah.
Which is just really daunting, quite frankly. And that sounds crazy. I am planning on working probably 50 years. Never what I thought I would do.
No.
And the one thing that we know is that the younger generation today can expect to live to be extremely old. They will be very old.
And they'll still be working.
They're going to have to.
They're
going to have to work longer to do that, unless something amazing comes in, like artificial intelligence, and somebody gives something back to society, or universal income or something else changes.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to fix that problem, because it's not sustainable.
It's not, and yes.
That's another gray rhino.
Definitely
on the
something
horizon.
we have to
Like,
work on fixing. And I think as designers, we can join in that conversation. We can at least support the work that is done in the spaces and the buildings and the places that we are. We can support that. But it has to be policy. It has to be, a lot of autonomy. It has to be other things that come into play to allow you to have, that balance or that integration, or to figure that out. And it's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough road.
Yeah.
I think we have a long road ahead of us to figure out, some of these challenges and our upcoming generation. And I'm here for it, ready to do it. I also know that you've been working on your next thing, your next fun thing, a project, and you have a book coming out. So tell us real quick while we wrap up, what?
If it doesn't,
because you didn't have enough to do already, Kay. Right. You decided to take on a book.
Right. Actually, we were asked to do it, and part of the reason that I've never written a book before is because our world is ever evolving.
Yes.
And it's like I never feel like it's done enough. Like there's always more that I want to explore. But I think we've done a ton of research over the last 8 years. We've done multiple research initiatives, pilots, studies, etc. There's so much it's not even all going to get in there, quite frankly, because we're continuing all of this. But we were asked to write a book about designing for neuro-inclusion in the built environment, and so we're doing that. And when we really started this initiative probably 8 years ago, I was having a conversation with our then CEO, Bill Hellmuth, and somebody said, "Oh, we're going to own this topic. Like, just so excited, we're going to own this." I said, "Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to own this topic." And we kind of mutually agreed that this is not a competitive advantage. This is a moral imperative.
Yes.
I don't know a single person on the planet that isn't impacted by sound, light, temperature. I think that ultimately we're going to get to a point that we're not talking about neurotypical or neurodivergent. It's just who we are.
Right.
Because I think this is actually far more prevalent than is being acknowledged right now or is even known. And I think that it isn't just for people that tend to have kind of, a more extreme reaction to some of the environments, or, a more hyper or hypo response. All of us are impacted by this. Yes. And we're sucking it up and we're suffering through, and we shouldn't. And we need to be able to address this. And what might be annoying for someone that's neurotypical can be debilitating for someone that's neurodivergent. And so we put it all out there. In the book we have 4 case studies of clients that we've been working with to infuse this into their spaces. We've won some projects for some of the stuff we've done, which is exciting.
Awesome.
We are putting out all of our recommendations. We have 20 interviews of experts. It's and everything that we have been researching, we're going to put in the book. And I think one of the things that we've kind of been holding back a little bit on is we're really hoping that the industry comes together on this, because here's where we are. There's a little bit of neuro-washing that's starting. Mm-hmm. People that are saying they understand this when they really don't, mm-hmm. and I think that's doing a disservice. There's a little bit of dispute about who should be consulting. Is it just the environmental psychologists or the operational folks? And does designers have a seat at the table? And I would say yes, because we understand space and the impact that it has.
Yes.
And we also really are we want to share it all. And we really want our industry to come together. Because if you think about this, 30 years ago when ADA came out, the industry all got behind one thing. We had to.
Yeah.
If that didn't happen, and if every firm would have come out with their own version, or every organization, it would have been a disaster. It would not have been clear, and we would never have made the progress that we made.
Right.
And when you think about this, every building today, almost globally, but every building in the U.S. and most of the world is designed for people that have a physical disability. But there are far more people that have neurodivergent challenges, and their needs are being ignored.
Which can be just as debilitating.
Absolutely.
As physical, if not more sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we really were hoping that the industry would come together. We've kind of tried, through multiple different things. IWBI has been a great partner. They've held some workshops with us, some other folks. But until that happens, we just kind of feel like we're sitting on all this great information, and we're going to put it out there for everyone, because we really do believe it's a moral imperative at this time that we have to create spaces that are making everyone feel more empowered, enabled, and welcome in the spaces that we're designing.
Love it. I agree. And I'm excited about the book. We'll
it comes
share
out
some additional information in the show notes.
Yeah, it comes out in early March.
It's exciting.
You can order it now, which is nothing is more motivating than finishing a book than the fact that they're selling it, right? Like, so I think the final manuscript is doing like 2 days.
Oh my gosh.
So, good timing on Cornet, but
Yeah.
all
You
good.
don't have anything else to
We're
do this
actually
weekend.
We're in a great place. All excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
This has been really great catching up. And
I love
one more
chatting.
question for you,
Yeah.
because we are talking about well-being. So I know you don't make a lot of time for hobbies and things, but you have 30 minutes of downtime. How do you recharge?
I try to start every day by working out.
Okay.
Just so that no matter what else happens during the day, I think physically, I realized during COVID what a toll travel takes on you. I mean, you're traveling in the evenings, you're traveling, it's like it takes an 8-hour day and makes it a 12 or 14-hour day.
Right.
You're out of sync, you're out of rhythm, you have no idea, no control over what you're going to eat. But I shouldn't even admit this is so bad. My kids actually even had to do an intervention with me recently because they said, Mom, when you're home, we don't have to eat at the same restaurant every night, like every time. Like, there are different restaurants in here, and it's like, you're right. We don't have to. But I
can.
Because I control nothing when I travel, and so I want to know that I'm going to get a good meal at a cheap price, fast, and I'm going to like it, right? So I'm going to this restaurant. If you want a free meal on your mother, you're coming with me. Otherwise, I don't care where you eat. Go do whatever you want to. See you later, right?
I love
So in all honesty, it's actually those little teeny, routine things that I do at home.
Okay.
When I am home, which isn't that often, but when I am, that just kind of ground me and just make me feel reset.
Good. I love it. Whatever it is, you have to find it and what works for you. So where can they find your book and all the information about it?
We actually have a website. I think it's www.inclusivedesign.com.
Okay.
I'll send you the link.
Great. We'll make sure we
but
share
it's it's selling like on Amazon and most of the book sites, and it's designing in neuro-inclusive workspaces.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. Have a great Cornet.
Thank you.
And we'll talk again soon.
Hey friends, if you enjoyed today's episode, please join in the conversation at Creative Place Podcast on LinkedIn or Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe. We're so glad you tuned in to Creative Place and look forward to seeing you next time.